Hey, what's up, guys? So, I've been thinking a lot about what it was like to be a disciple in the days after the cross, right? So, like, they had been walking with Christ for over 3 years at this point. They had seen everything that he had done, all the miracles that he had performed. They heard all of his words, and they had been immersed in this environment with Christ. And then the week before, they had marched in with him, proclaiming him as king with a whole crowd of people. And then he was on the cross and died. And now they're in this period of uncertainty where they're probably confused. They don't know what to expect or what they're going to do. But what they didn't know was that they were being prepared for a new role and a new responsibility, same job, but in a different form. And what I really want to talk to y'all about tonight is the beauty that comes from waiting, the beauty that comes from waiting on the Lord. And so our verse tonight is going to be from Psalm 27, verses 13 and 14, and it says, "I am certain that I will see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart be courageous. Wait for the Lord." And see, when we wait for the Lord, when the disciples were waiting for the Lord, what they didn't realize was that they were being prepared for a new role. Because see, they had always walked with Christ. Christ was always the person who was looked to, that was loved, that was hated, that if they had a problem, they went to Christ for it. And when Christ came back, what he said was that it is better that I leave so that I can send the helper who will dwell with you, instead of him being there beside them. And what that meant was that they were still disciples of Christ. They were still commissioned to spread the gospel and share the good news with everybody. But now the world was going to see Christ in them. They were going to be picking up their own cross and carrying the burden. They were going to be sharing the good news. And guys, Christ should shine from you in everything that you do. The world sees Christ in you. The world sees God inside of you, and that should shine in all situations. And so when we come to this period of uncertainty where we don't know if we're going back to life as we knew it, or we're going to stay in this kind of quarantine for a little bit longer, what we need to understand is that there is beauty in waiting. And there's really 3 points I wanted to hit. The first is that waiting is where God does his work. Waiting is where God will change your heart. He'll give you a new perspective. He'll change your habits and change your thoughts. He'll give you a new vision. Waiting is where faith comes in. Waiting is where God does his work. Right? When you plant a seed, and you water it, and you cover it, you water it some more, you tend to it, but you wait. And God is the one who comes in and he brings that seed to life. Right? It's like a butterfly waiting in the cocoon, or I guess a caterpillar waiting in the cocoon before it becomes a butterfly. God is working in that moment to bring something out of this that is good. You just have to seek it. And you have to look at the things that are unseen. Because see, the second thing that waiting does is it allows you to appreciate the things that you might have taken for granted. See, right now we're having to be more intentional with not only our words, but the way we live our lives. We always try to be intentional with our words. But now we have to be intentional with the way we live our lives. Where we go, what we do, the things that we can do and not do are restricted. But what that's doing is bringing the families together. It's really showing what is God-given and what's needed and what's unneeded. And it is bringing clarity to the world, because now you can take a step back and see the world through the lens of the Word of God. And you can't do that if you're rushing around. You can't do that if things are going out of order, right? And take, for example, this is the perfect example of being able to appreciate things that hadn't been appreciated before. In India right now, they can see the Himalaya mountains for the first time in 30 years, guys, because the pollution levels have dropped in 1 week. The pollution levels have dropped enough that a whole generation of people are seeing the beauty of the Himalaya mountains for the first time. Let that sink in. And you can look around and you can see the glory of God that's in everything in our lives. Good or bad, you can see the glory of God, and you can seek to see the glory of God in everything. But the important thing is that God is a God of order. And so the third point is that, waiting keeps us in step with God. It keeps us on His timetable, because we are supposed to walk in the order that God lays out. We oftentimes, in an age of instant gratification, we want something, we want it now, and we move on to the next thing, and we don't have enough time to do everything that we want to do or that we need to do. And what this forced worldwide waiting is doing is it makes us take a step back and let God go before us, and we expect His loving kindness to come behind us. It allows us and makes us think before we act. And there's so much that is coming together from us staying in step with God and in His order that is setting things right, providing the opportunity to set things right. Because this is rest, right? But this isn't, it's not fruitless rest, and it's not complacent rest. This is transformative rest. This is where we are accepting that new role and the new responsibility, because we're providing Christianity. We're being disciples. We're sharing the good news, but we're doing it in new ways that we've never done before, on new platforms, and it's reaching more people because of this. I've heard stories of people in Africa that are watching church services for the first time because they're forced to be indoors. Jerusalem, right, has reached twice as many of the Jewish population with the good news of the New Testament than they ever have before, because everybody's been indoors on the lockdown and quarantine. And it brings me to my last kind of thought around today, is that oftentimes, guys, people want to fight, and they want to fight what's going on instead of just simply taking rest and knowing that you're in God's path. And if you are walking in righteousness, if you're walking the path that God set out before you, He has you where He wants you to be. And people articulate pain and suffering, things that aren't fun, because guys, life comes in seasons. It does not come in moments. And a lot of times in today's world, we think that we need a lot of things. We need to go do a lot of things to make us happy. A lot of things that are fun, because that brings happiness. And that's not true. Happiness comes from a sense of peace. Happiness comes from accepting the things that God has given to you and holding on to those and internalizing those, and from resting in God's order, and from having that security of self and your relationship with God, and being able to see the world in seasons on the bigger scale than bit by bit. Because bit by bit can get confusing and frustrating, but God does things in order, and He brings life in seasons. And when we feel those things, and what's going on. A lot of times people misrepresent the pain and the negativity that's in their life as an attack from the devil, which is not how that always is. If something looks bad, it can be very good. The best example of that is the cross itself. Salvation came through the pain of the cross. So I would challenge you to question how much of what is happening to you that you might attribute as an attack from the devil is really God pushing and pulling on you, shaping you to mold you into what he wanted you to be and what your purpose is. Because both come with pain. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The staff pulls you back onto the path and saves you. The rod smacks you into correction to stay on the right path. And so, how much of what's going on is from God, setting you straight, shaping you, and molding you? And how much of it is negative? But when you seek the things of God, when you stay focused on God and his word and the things that come from him, you are inherently resisting the devil, and he has to flee. So pay no mind to fights that don't need to be fought, because all you're going to do is waste energy and become exhausted on those sort of things, and it could potentially open the door for something worse to come along, for a bigger fight to come along when it's not needed. You walk in victory. So don't fight when it's not necessary, but simply rest in God and take comfort in his loving kindness and your trust and your faith with him. And once again, be certain that the Lord's goodness is in the land of the living. I am certain that I will see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living, this life, this world. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart be courageous. Wait for the Lord. Because guys, there's beauty in the waiting. God is in the waiting. Faith is activated in the waiting. And remember that. And I love you guys. And I will see y'all Sunday.